There is this hook in React that I'm pretty sure that you haven't used before. It's a hook that has a very specific, very niche use case that you're not really going to be reaching for in your day-to-day work as a React developer. But when you do find yourself in a situation where you need to use it, this hook is really nice because it solves the problem really beautifully. And even if you're not really going to be using it all that often, it's still important to learn about it, to learn and understand how it works, because it actually teaches you a lot about how React works under the hood and how React re-renders to show you updated values. It basically illustrates to you this whole reactive thing that React is going for itself. And so in this video, I want to take a look at this hook and I want to show it to you in a very interesting way. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a very simple to-do app, right? Your typical to-do app with even less functionality, but we're going to be doing it with one very critical restriction. We can't use any state. This means we can't use useState, useReducer, any derivative of those things like a state management solution or even React Query. And we're also not going to be using server components because we want to stay on the client and still use some hooks. Now, this might not sound like such a big restriction, but you're going to see as we actually try to build this to-do app without state, not having state is a huge limitation to what we're able to do with React. Because the whole point of React is to be reactive, right? To react to changes. And the way that we do that is by using state, by using the tools that React provides us for state. And if we can't access those tools, then we can't really build reactive applications. So yeah. I'm very excited. You should be as well. We're going to learn a ton in this video, and you're going to see just how powerful and underrated this hook in React actually is. Now, before we continue with the rest of this video, I just want to take a very quick moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant. Brilliant is a learning platform that helps you become a better thinker and problem solver. They have thousands of interactive visual lessons covering a wide range of topics like math, science, programming, data analysis, and of course, AI. Brilliant's learning platform is designed to be uniquely effective. Each lesson that you have on there is filled with hands-on problem solving that actually lets you play and interact with the concepts that you're learning, which is a method that has been proven to be 6 times more effective than watching your traditional lecture video. Their courses are designed to build your understanding from the ground up, and they mix engaging challenges with competitive features and daily reminders to help you stay consistent. Plus, all of the content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from very well-known places such as Stanford, MIT, Microsoft, Google, and more. And if you're into programming, which you should be because you're watching this React video, they have a growing collection of programming courses, which are a fantastic way to build timeless problem-solving skills to really be able to thrive in this ever-evolving world of programming. From learning Python to developing an intuition for computer logic, you're going to get hands-on experience with real programs, and you're going to learn to think like a programmer. You can start learning today completely for free by going to brilliant.org/causeandsolutions, scanning the QR code on the screen, or simply clicking the first link in the description. And for my viewers, Brilliant is offering 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. Thank you once again to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back to talking about this really cool underrated hook in React. Alright, so let's begin and let's start looking at some code. Now, I first want to remind you what our task is for this video. Our task is to build a to-do app with the restriction that we can't use any state. So what we have here is we have some boilerplate code to get us up and running, and this is actually all the functionality that we'll need for our to-do app. The only thing that we need to do here is to actually make this reactive, because you're going to see this application, even though it has the to-dos here and the function to add a to-do, is not actually working. So our first step is going to be understanding why it's not working and seeing all the potential things that we could do and why those aren't working as well. And then I'm going to show you the clever way to solve this solution over here, and then we're going to get to the hook that this whole video is about. So let me first prove to you that this isn't working. So what we have here, just to kind of go over the code a little bit, we have here this next ID variable. This is simply here so that we can just automatically increment the ID every single time that we're going to be adding a to-dos. Then we have our array of to-dos here, right? So it's going to have one to-do initially. We're using next ID plus plus. So this is going to evaluate to 1, which is going to be our first to-do. And then every single time that we want to add a to-do, we're simply going to spread the new to-dos, and then we're going to get a new to-do over here. And here we're just going to put the next ID so that we can keep track of the IDs of the to-dos that we're adding. Inside of the body of the components, nothing fancy. We have a button here that just calls the add to do on click, and then we're just showing our to-dos over here, right? So let's see how this application works, and let's see if we have a reactive application with just this code. So here's the application. We have our button, we have our initial to-do. So here I can press add, and I can add a new to-do, and I'm clicking it, but nothing is happening on the screen. Our application is currently not working. It's in a broken state. Now let's talk about why it's in a broken state, because it's very important to understand that before we move on and actually implement the solution. The reason why it's in a broken state is because our problem is not really state in terms of storing values, right? I mean, we're storing the values over here. We have our to-dos, right? And we can store our values here. Our problem is not storing state. Storing state is really easy. You can just define a variable and you can store your state. Our problem is also not updating the state, because updating is also just as easy. You can just redefine the value here, or you can push to it, or you can do whatever, and you can just make your updates to your state. Those are not our problems. Our problems are getting React to actually, no pun intended, react to those changes, to re-render so that we can see them on the screen, because that's how we can actually see that our application is working. Otherwise, we can update things all we want, but as a user, nothing's going to happen, so we're just not going to see that anything is working, right? Because if I come here and I do a console log of the to-dos, so just that we can see that we have our actual to-dos, our to-dos over here are actually going to get logged. If I just clear this and I add a to-do, we have 2, we have 3, we have 4, we have 5, we have 7, right? And so on, right? Our problem is not storing them and updating them. It's just that React is not going to re-render to show them. And if we refresh the page to trigger a new re-render, well, we're going to lose all of our to-dos because they're not persisted, and the application is always going to be in the same initial state, right? So that's our problem here. We can store to-dos all we want, we can update them, but we can't tell React with this approach that it has to re-render. That's why in React, you should never use normal variables for your state, because React is not going to re-render whenever they change. Usually, you would use something like useState, right, which is built specifically for this. You would take your to-dos, you would put them in a useState, and then you would call the function to set the to-dos on your state, and that would tell React that, hey, we have a new value of something, so we should re-render the component. That is the most fundamental, the built-in way of managing state in React, because it works with the React lifecycle, and React can know and re-render and update itself every single time they make a change to your state, right? So I hope that you can start to see the actual limitation that we have here. Now, how can we actually fix this? Well, let's first start with maybe some naive approaches that still won't work, but I still want to show them to you because it's important to understand why they don't work. So what we can do instead, I'm going to come here, is we can maybe try to create a ref, right? Because a ref is not state, so it doesn't fall under our restrictions, and we could theoretically use it in our component. And maybe a ref would work because a ref is a hook from React. So maybe if you put this in a hook, it would work and it would get our component to re-render. So if I did something like const to-dos ref and then create a ref here and then import the useRef hook, which again, we can do, it doesn't fall under our restrictions. And then here, we're just going to set refs.current over here. And then we're going to update on the add to-dos. We're going to update our ref instead. And let's see here, we just need to use our to-dos ref.current, right? To use the value from a ref. Let's see if this works. And now here, if you click, you're going to see that we're getting the same exact thing. Actually, we're not. We're only getting one of them. This shouldn't happen. Why? Oh, right. We also need to console log the to-dos ref. That would make a little bit more sense. Let's try this again. Let's refresh. Let's clear the console logs. Now see if I add, we're getting the same exact result, and we're still not getting the re-rendering on our component. We're still not visually seeing our new to-dos, even though they are being added and managed within the state. And that's because even though this to-dos ref here is a ref that is getting created by a hook, refs in React are also non-reactive, just like your normal variables over here. There's actually very minimal differences between variables and refs. There is a difference, I will talk about it, but the common thing that they share is that they are not reactive, right? So even if you're updating a ref over here, you're not going to cause the component to re-render. So how do we do it? How do we solve the problem? How do we make this reactive? And how do we use this underrated hook that I keep talking about, but not showing in this video? Well, for that, we're going to have to come here to our new file, which is going to be our to-do-store.ts. And ironically, the way that we're going to be solving this problem is actually by going outside of React. So inside of this file, which is a normal TypeScript file, has nothing to do with React, we're going to be creating a store that is going to hold our to-dos and some functions to update the store. And then we're going to use that to connect React to it. You can really think of this store as a bare bones version of something that you would create with Zustand, right? You create a store, you put some value in there, some functions to update the store, and then you bring it over into React. We're going to do all of this in this file, except the bringing over into React. That part is going to happen directly in this component over here. So So the first thing that we want to put here is exactly the same thing that we had in our main component over here. So we have our next ID over here, and then we have this array of to-dos, which we're using the let keyword because we're going to be mutating this array of to-dos. It starts with the same to-do number 1 that we had here in our component. So far, nothing is different. We just put the same thing in a new file. Next over here, we're going to put this line of code. We're going to define an array of listeners. So this is going to be an array here. And this one will take in an array of functions. And each function has this signature. It takes no arguments and returns nothing. The simplest function that you can have. We're going to use this to store an array of listeners that we can then call whenever we make an update to our to-do store to alert the listeners that, hey, we have something new in our to-do store. And then over here, we're going to export and create a to-do store. And this is going to be an object. I'm going to start it off as empty for now. This to-do store is going to hold everything that we need to manipulate and manage our to-dos. Right, so again, think of this as if you're doing it in Zustand, right? You create your store, you define whatever you want in it. That's what we're going to be doing here. The first thing that we want to do is we want to create a function that we're going to call getSnapshot. This is a very simple function. It simply returns our to-dos. So we can actually call this function, and whenever we want to get the current state of our to-dos, that's what this function is going to do. We get a snapshot of the current state. If we added 7 to-dos, we're going to get our 7 to-dos when we call this function, right? Because again, it's going to look at this to-dos variable over here, right? Which is always going to be updated because again, we're not inside of the React world. We don't have to wait for any new renders. We can just update the to-dos and directly on the next line, we can call getSnapshot and get the current state of our to-dos. Then we're going to come here and we're going to create a subscribe function. Now this subscribe function is very interesting. This one is going to take one callback. So this is going to be a function over here. This one we're going to call the listener. This has the same type signature as all of our listeners above. It's a function that takes no arguments and returns nothing. And what we're going to do inside of this function is we're just going to add this listener to the array of listeners over here. That's why we have this array over here. We're just going to reassign it and then append the new listener to this array of listeners. And then this function is going to return something. And what it's going to return is it's simply going to remove the listener from the array of listeners. That's it, right? So now this function essentially kind of acts as an entry point to our store that we can actually get and have a listener. And then it's going to clean up after itself to remove the listener after it's done. If you're astute, you can kind of know where this is going and how we're eventually going to put this in React, and React will be able to do that. But yeah, let's get to that. We haven't gotten there yet. And finally, the last thing that we need is we need a function to actually add a to-do over here. So we're just going to add a to-do, and this is going to do the same exact code that we had here inside of our function. I just realized that we still have the ref over here. It's fine. We're going to remove all of this anyways. We're just going to take all of our to-dos, spread them, and then assign a new to-do over here using the next ID, which again is going to be automatically incremented. Cool. So now with this, we have a simple store and we're almost done. We're only missing one critical piece. We haven't yet called any of these listeners over here, right? We're still updating our state here. We're still setting it. We're allowing someone to subscribe to our state, right? By passing the listener. We're allowing someone to get the snapshot of our current state, but we're not calling any of these listeners whenever we have a state change to happen. So let's fix that. And that's actually going to be very simple. We can just come here and just create a new function that we're going to call emit change. And here what we're going to do is for every listener in our array of listeners, we're just simply going to call the listener. That's it. And then what we can do is we can take this function and we can put it here inside of the body of our add to do. So whenever we add a to do, we're first going to make the change over here, add our to do's, and then we're going to emit a change, which is basically going to call all of our listeners, and they can do whatever we want with that change. We've essentially sent a signal that, hey, something is new in our store. We have a new to do, so you should probably do something about it. And that's it. With this, our store is fully functional, fully complete, and it's going to work exactly as we expect. Now, again, this is completely not related to React. All of this could have been done in a different file, in a different project. It doesn't really matter. React is not involved here at all. Now, what we need to do is we need to take this store over here and actually bring it over into the React world and connect React to it. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back here to our component and let's finally start using this hook that I've been teasing this entire video. So the first thing that we want to do is just remove everything that we have about the current to-dos. We currently don't need any of that. And now instead of useRef, we're going to import useSyncExternalStore. This is the hook that we actually want to use. This hook, as the name implies, it will sync to some external store. What external store? Well, our to-do store is an external store, right? It has nothing to do with React. So from the point of view of React, it is something completely external. And then this hook is going to sync that external store and then bring it over into the React world with all of the reactivity and everything that we've come to expect about React and how it works. And this is how you use this hook. So first I'm going to do useSyncExternalStore, and this one takes in 2 arguments, and the first one is going to be the subscribe function, which we'll need to import from our to-do store, and the second argument is going to be a function to get the snapshot, right? So this is all that we have to do to connect React to our external store. We pass the subscribe function, and then we pass the get snapshot function, and React is going to do everything else. And what we have here, what is the return value? We can do const to-dos over here. This is going to be an array of our to-dos over here. Right, you can see we have an array of to-dos, each one has an ID and a text property, and this is an array, right? So we can actually pass our to-dos over here and just map over our to-dos. And then to add a to-do, the simple thing that we have to do is just import our to-do store and then call directly the add to-do, because we're importing the entire store over here. So we have access to all of these functions. We have access to get snapshot, to subscribe, and of course to our add to-do function, right? So all of this, now we've plugged it into our React component. So let's see it in action and let's see if this works. I'm going to refresh over here. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, and I'm going to press once, add a to-do, and there we go. We have a new to-do. We have another one, and a final one, right? It works. We've successfully connected our React component, the React lifecycle, the React reactivity to something that is completely outside of React. Isn't this cool? Now, this is actually very cool, but how does it work, right? Because I've just shown you that it works, but it's really important that you understand fundamentally how this actually works, right? So we're passing here this to-do store.subscribe. You have to remember that this to-do store.subscribe is actually taking it here an argument, a callback. This argument is actually going to be provided by React itself. This listener over here, when we pass it here to this useSyncExternalStore, is going to contain an internal React function. An internal React function which has access to everything that the component has, including the ability to cause the component to re-render. And so we're taking this internal function from React and then we're spreading it to our listeners array over here. So then our listeners array is going to contain an internal React function. And then we're returning it here the ability to unsubscribe, to remove the listener from our array. React is again going to control when this gets called. For example, whenever the component unmounts, it's going to call this return function over here and it's going to remove the listener to clean up after itself. And then whenever we add a new to-do over here, we make our actual change and then we call this emit change function, which simply maps over every single one of our listeners and just calls them, right? That's it. So now we're going to call the React internal function, effectively telling React, hey, we have something new. We have something that maybe needs a component to re-render. And so then React is going to be notified that we have something different. And then React is now going to have to go and get the state to see if something actually changed, to see if it actually needs to re-render the component, right? All of this is being done internally by React using this external SyncExternalStore hook. And then React is going to use this get snapshot function, which is going to come here and tell it exactly the current value of the to-dos. And so we'll be able to compare this value with the previous value of the to-dos and see if anything actually changed. And if it did, it's going to re-render the component. And then you're going to see the up-to-date value directly here in your UI, and your component is going to re-render. And honestly, that's it. That's all that you need. You just need one hook, 2 arguments over here to your hook, one simple store, and you just can connect literally anything to React, right? Because here, this store could have been anything. Could have been a store in a different package, a different library, could have been something that we totally don't control. Doesn't matter. As long as the store exports a subscribe function that has here a listener, so we can actually pass the function into it, and then a get snapshot function, we don't really care about anything else because this is going to work automatically with React. And I mean, this is beautiful, right? Like this hook is super cool because it solves this problem really well. Now, again, you're probably not going to be using this in your React applications, but if you find yourself in a situation where you actually would benefit from using this hook, there you go. You can connect anything to React. And the reason why you're not going to be using this hook that often in your React applications is because you have access to state. You have access to use reducer, to React query, of all of these things. These essentially do all the same things. And it doesn't make sense for you to do all of this work and create an external store and then connect it to React when you can just use state instead, right? That's what state is built for. This is only for cases where you have something that you don't control that is outside of React and you still want to interact with it in the React world, right? So again, that's why I said this is a very niche use case, but when you do have that use case and when you need to solve that problem, this hook is coming in clutch. So yeah, now you know about this hook. Now you know how you can connect anything to React. You've seen an actual real example, and hopefully now you understand React a little bit better in terms of how it works under the hood. And fun fact, this example is actually not my example. It's taken directly from the official React documentation on the useSyncExternalStore page. You have the same code over here, the same things that I actually had to do, and you even have an interactive exercise over here with literally the same code that I have. Spoiler, I just copied it from this page, and you can go now and play around with it to actually get a feel for how this works yourself. Right, so I really hope that you see the value in this hook and that you see the value in understanding how this actually works, and that now hopefully by watching this video, you are a better React developer. So you're welcome. That's it. That's all that I have for this video. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below to let me know what you thought of this video, of this hook, and see if you have any specific use case for it. You can click here to subscribe. You can click here to watch a different video of mine. My name has been Kozin. This is Kozin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.